The 1920s were known as the golden age of aviation. That's because during this time, advancements in plane technology led to planes that were much faster. And this was also the start of commercial aviation. So public fascination with flying was at an all-time high. And pilots were basically seen as heroes. Some pilots even competed in air races and public competitions, only adding to the public fervor. And among the people who were famous for competing in these Army competitions was a U.S. Army colonel named James McCready. As a 3-time recipient of the McKay Trophy, he was always looking for an edge. Plus, he knew that if pilots were going to keep up with all of these technological advancements, visual performance had to keep pace too. And he believed the first step in that process was a better pair of sunglasses. You see, at high speeds, things get blurry, or in technical terms, we see less contrast. Plus, at higher altitudes, there's a ton of glare. It got so bad, some pilots were even complaining of migraines, especially on foggy days. He knew something had to be done. And then everything came to a breaking point. A friend of McCready, another pilot named Shorty Schroeder, had his sun goggles malfunction while attempting a record-breaking climb. The seal around his lenses failed mid-flight, causing them to fog up, so he ripped them off. But then his corneas began to freeze over because at that elevation it's like minus 50 degrees. Somehow Shorty survived the flight, but for McCready, this was a clear sign that he had to follow his calling. So he got to brainstorming some ideas before finally meeting with an emerging optical goods company by the name of Bausch & Lomb. And seeing some potential in the idea, plus his reputation and influence, they helped him develop a prototype. These sunglass prototypes had 3 key features: arms made from wired steel to make them strong, lightweight, and flexible; teardrop-shaped convex lenses to make them block and reflect as much light as possible; and their patented green G15 lenses to cut glare. Now all they needed was the perfect name to convey that they were designed to ban rays. The sunglasses reached production in the 1930s and they were an immediate hit with pilots, but they really exploded in popularity during World War II. You see, the public began to see more and more photos of Air Force and Army personnel wearing the sunglasses. None more iconic than one of General Douglas MacArthur landing on a beach in the Philippines. So from there, it wasn't too long before the public came demanding and Bausch & Lomb got to supplying. But they never stopped innovating on ways to improve their sunglasses for pilots. They dropped a second aviator with their patented Calichrome lenses this time to help with contrast. And then another one featuring mirrored lenses to reflect even more light. And these went crazy, pushing the sunglasses to status symbol levels. They kept releasing more models and marketing them for different purposes, like the Ray-Ban Outdoorsman and the Ray-Ban Shooter. Just as the aviator craze was beginning to die down in the 50s, they dropped the Wayfarer. And with the help of Hollywood, this model exploded into American culture. Wayfarers were worn by celebrities like Bob Dylan, James Dean, Marilyn Monroe, and even John F. Kennedy. And now, as a must-have sunglass, Wayfarers even began cannibalizing sales of aviators. And so when their craze also began to die down, once again, Bausch & Lomb was in a bit of a tight spot. But you know how fashion's all cyclical, so by the 70s and 80s, aviators were back, hugely boosted in popularity by none other than the king of pop himself, Michael Jackson. He even wore them while winning an award at the Grammys. Then Tom Cruise wore them in the movie Top Gun, where he played a fighter pilot, which was the highest grossing movie of that year globally. Ray-Ban kept the hits coming with the Clubmaster. In truth, these were a rendition of an existing style of frame called brow lines, but when Ray-Ban did it, they went off. But as we've seen now, after the highs, inevitably come lows, only this time, extremely lows. In fact, the brand had reached an all-time low in profitability, and this time, there were no signs of bouncing back. Their sunglasses simply weren't cool. And even worse, to recoup on their over-inventory, they had been reduced to selling their sunglasses in convenience stores and gas stations. Bausch & Lomb, a little panicky, not knowing how to revive the brand, and unwilling to wait and pray that some celebrity would miraculously rescue their brand, knew they had to do something. Plus, they kind of wanted to go all in on this other opportunity they thought had more upside, but they needed cash to do it. So they sold the business to eyewear conglomerate Luxottica in 1999 for $640 million. And Luxottica immediately got to work. They took the product out of convenience stores, then they moved production to their facility in Italy. And being that the best eyewear was made in Italy, this helped the public begin to see Ray-Ban as a luxury brand again. In time, they worked out distribution deals with Neiman Marcus and Nordstrom. And by the mid-2010s, the company was doing $25 billion in annual revenue, with Ray-Ban alone accounting for about 25% of that. Today, Luxottica is huge. They have a level of vertical integration a lot of companies could only dream of, and a market cap that's closing in on $100 billion. But being a publicly traded company, they can't afford to have the wild swings in profitability that little old Bausch & Lomb had. They need to keep their shareholders happy and business on the up and up. And that's where their success could become a problem, you see. Because when it comes to branding, you have to tip your hat to Ray-Ban. Nearly 100 years in the game and still standing as the biggest eyewear brand in the world. But strictly from a quality of materials perspective, maybe due to a cost-cutting approach that's all too familiar with big corporations, the talk within the industry is that the quality of the brand is in decline. And from that perspective, one could even argue that they're getting closer and closer to what you might find at your local convenience store. Like if you want, subscribe if you feel, and if you want to hear about a brand that's doing quality, legit, check out my last video.